Have you ever wondered what sets successful or thriving marriages apart from the rest? Have you ever thought about the secrets possibly that has gone into building a love that stands the test of time? And how can you cultivate a relationship, a marriage that brings joy and fulfillment to both you and your partner, your spouse? Well, today we are unveiling the seven attitudes that can transform, and it's been proven because success leaves clues, and those who have experienced the successful marriages, long-term relationships, if you should ask them, and I have had a front row seat because as a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified relationship coach, I hear firsthand from a lot of these marriages. Many of them, of course, are struggling, but those who are doing well or have done well through having gone through counseling and or coaching, these seven attributes are, I mean, attitudes are so important. I teach them, I encourage them, and when my clients are able to practice them, they are, it's unbelievable what happens. And that's why we're going to talk about those seven attitudes in this video today. So, what are the seven attitudes that can transform your marriage, your relationship from good to great, from where it is right now to a more satisfying and a more um, pleasurable and welcome marriage? Now, as you know, or you would imagine, and maybe you thought this way at the very beginning of your marriage, that marriage is pretty awesome, but sometimes it can feel a little tricky, right? Well, guess what? There's some secret ingredients, like I mentioned, success leave clues, and having been married for 38 years as of this recording, I think I have learned a lot along the way. And some of what you're going to hear is from my own personal experience as well as professional, and from those who I have spoken to, books I have read, researches that I have done, and you name it. These secrets that we're sharing today, I call them special attitudes. They can help you to build a strong and happy marriage that lasts a lifetime. And these seven, right, you'll discover in this video are ones that you may not have heard this way before. And I mentioned that because the way I've framed or unpacking this one, it's in a manner in which I believe that, well, I know this. I know you've never heard these words before being used, and you'll see in a few moments why I say that. The principles you probably have heard, I would say, yes, you have heard that, but the way I've packaged them, you've never heard them before. And I guarantee you haven't. And if you have, please let me know, correct me, and mention in the comments below that you have heard them when I start going through them. Now, I have given a special name to each of these attitudes. So don't be surprised when you hear the names, and don't think it's a grammatical error because it's not. I made these names up. And I've also made up a name that captures all seven of these attitudes. Now, as I think of someone, as I mentioned before, having worked with couples as a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified relationship coach for almost 2 decades, and I've mentioned being married for 38 years plus as of this recording, I think I'm qualified, and I would love to hear your thoughts. I think I'm qualified to make up these names, right? And I hope you agree. Now, if you have been around for some time, I would imagine that you have heard of the Beatitudes, which are the teachings that Jesus gave, which is also known as a Sermon on the Mount, where he taught about the attitudes that those who follow him should have, right? And even though I'm not comparing his teachings to this one, the point is there was a name given to his teachings called the Beatitudes, right? And it really is a capturing of the essence of these attitudes he taught that those who follow him should have. And so, as they were called, and it's called the Beatitudes, I've called these 7 attitudes the marriage attitudes. Marriage attitudes. Yes, you heard me right. Marriage attitudes. And you're going to see why I've called it the marriage attitudes, because every one of these attitudes are going to have at the end a TUDES or TUDE sound, right? Tude sound. So, with that said, let's dive right in. The first attitude that I believe is so essential, is so important for every marriage, and it's one that I've seen people, especially those who have had a Christian marriage, when they go to the altar, they invite God and they invite the family and friends to come and witness their marriage. But what I've noticed have happened in quite some cases is these couples will go about and leave, we would say, God at the altar. Now, God cannot be left anywhere because He is everywhere, right? He's omnipresent, so He's everywhere at all times. So God cannot be left anywhere. But for a figure of imagination, just think about it this way: they invite God, He was there at the altar, and then they left Him there. Why? They now go about living their lives without any consideration of God, no consulting of God, no praying, no inviting God into their marriage, into their lives. And when they hit the wall and things begin to go wrong, guess what? Who do they call upon? God. Now, God has no problem in answering. God is not like man, right? Like you and I, who, if it was me and being God, I'm thinking, now I would say, go figure it out now. You're on your own, baby. You're on your own. You thought you could do without me. Now go ahead and fix it without me. But that's not how God operates, right? God doesn't operate that way. And thank God He does not. Because when people cry out to God, He's more than willing to hear. But these individuals, these couples, many times, it's in hard times, difficult times, crisis, that they cry out to God and God hears them. So, God-attitude is the first attitude that I want to impress upon you, that it must be a part of your daily lives. Successful marriages, ones that lasts for a long time, has some essence of this attitude um, wrapped in it, right? Is embedded into that marriage, is part of the DNA of their marriage. Now, you say, Kingsley, what about those marriages that have lasted for a long time, but it doesn't seem that God is involved? There are always exceptions to everything. But I can tell you there are more marriages that have lasted a very long time and is lasting a very long time today because of this God-attitude attitude. Because what this means is that you're building your marriage on the solid foundation of God. You're simply saying, I want God to be the foundation of my marriage. I want God to be involved in every aspect of my marriage. So we pray together. My wife and I have done this for all of our marital life, right? I can't get that word out. Our marital life, where is praying, attending church, reading the Bible, being involved in the things of God. And we found that that's made a difference. And you're going to see in the next few attitudes that I share why this is such a very important foundational element to every marriage, every relationship. He's the anchor that keeps your relationship steady, even in stormy seas. He is the one that calmed the storm. If you remember, there was a time the disciples were on the river and they got into trouble because the storm came, a very bad storm came, and it was really rocking their world where they thought they were going to drown. They thought, this is it. We're going to die. And they cry out to Jesus. Now, Jesus was on the same boat with them, and he was asleep. Here he was asleep during the storm. And Jesus came and he rebuked the storm. He said, be still. And the storm obeyed him because he's God. He's able to speak because he spoke the world into existence. So he's able to say to the storm, be still, and it was still. And so when you're experiencing storm in your marriage, in your relationship, he's the one who speaks peace. Therefore, having God in the centerpiece of your marriage is a great way to have at least a chance to succeed. You know, I love what Psalm 127 verse 1 says. It says, unless the Lord builds a house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord builds a house, the builders labor in vain. You could say the couple labor in vain without God helping them to build that house. So just like a house needs a strong foundation, so does your marriage. It needs a strong foundation, and that foundation is God. He will uphold, he will hold up this marriage like none other, like nothing else can. So that's why I chose gratitude as a first attitude we ought to have, an attitude towards God, an attitude towards making God front and center of our marriage. The second attitude is forgive-titude, which I believe is very self-explanatory what that might mean. Forgive-titude means embracing forgiveness in your marriage. It's simply saying we're going to walk in the forgiveness of each other. It's about letting go of past hurts and choosing, right? Choosing to move forward with love and grace. Now, this is not easy, as you know, and may have experienced when you may have had to ask your spouse, your husband, your wife for forgiveness. You may have had to sought forgiveness from them because you've done something that really offended them. And maybe you may have been the one who have to grant forgiveness because of something that was done to you. And you know it's not easy, but we have to remind ourselves that we have been forgiven by God. God has provided forgiveness for us for our wrongdoings, our offense towards him. And he has said the same way he has forgiven us, we ought to forgive another person. You know, in Colossians 3, verse 13, it says, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. So when you have a grievance against your spouse, this is the time to walk in forgive-titude, right? This is the attitude of forgiveness where you're simply saying, I don't have to, but I'm going to do it because God has forgiven me. Number one. Number two, it's also for my own sake, my own sanity, my own well-being. Because when we forgive someone, my friend, you're letting go of the burden and the weight of that you carry that keeps you up at night and tossing and turning because it's on your heart. It's eating away at your heart. And until you release that and forgive and allow God to heal that spot, it's going to hold you back. It's going to hold your marriage back. So remembering to forgive each other, just like Jesus forgives you, what that does, it helps keep our marriage healthy and strong. The third attitude is this is one that I did not make up because you would see it's one that happens so often or should happen so often in our marriage. Many times, this is one I see is not practiced as often as it should because you're taking this one spouse is taking the other for granted, right? Familiarity breeds contempt because you expect certain things from your spouse, your husband, your wife. You just don't practice this attitude as much as you should. And this attitude is called gratitude, the attitude of gratitude, because it's a glue that holds your marriage together. It's about appreciating the little things and expressing thanks to each other every day. I love this quote where William Ward says this: gratitude can transform common days into Thanksgiving, turn routine jobs into joy, and change ordinary opportunities into blessings. That's what gratitude does. So every day I want to encourage you to practice simply saying, thank you, or I appreciate that. You know, one of the things that my wife and we can say we pride ourselves in is constantly simply saying thank you for something that we may do to each other or for each other, even though it's something that we would say, okay, that's that person's role. You know, most times, I'm outside trying to make sure that our yard looks a certain way. And my wife would say, thank you for keeping the yard looking so nice. Or she may say, it looks so good. So she affirms that. Or maybe it could be, I may cook and she will also say thank you. And she may cook and she cooks most of the time, I must say. And I would say, thank you. That's a good meal. I appreciate that. You hand your spouse something, or some water or whatever they ask for. Make certain that if you're receiving of that, say thank you. Don't take it for granted. I cannot tell you the amount of times I've been out with some people and I've seen couples where they might be handed a water that or something what they ask for and not even say thank you. It's as if it never happened. It's that familiarity and expectation and lack of gratitude. But my friend, this can go a long way in your relationship. So small acts of kindness can make a big difference in your marriage and keep your bond strong. Hey, before we go any further, my team has notified me that more than 70% of you who are watching this channel is a new user. And I want to say thank you for being here. I greatly appreciate that. If you're finding this channel to be valuable and receiving value from these videos, would you do me a favor and help me reach more people so that they too can find value in this as well? To do so, all you've got to do is hit that subscribe button so that YouTube can generously spread my video to more people. And if you are feeling more generous, you can hit the like button as well. And I would really appreciate that. Now let's get back to where we were in our conversation. The fourth attitude is what I call empathitude. Empathitude, which of course you may understand that this comes from the word empathy. And empathitude is about putting yourself in your spouse's shoes and seeking to understand their perspective. This is not an easy one, especially when you're upset, you're riled up, and you are in heated moment. The last thing you want to do is try to understand where your spouse is coming from. Most times you want to win the battle, the fight. You want to make sure they hear you. You want to be heard. And so each person is jockeying for their own position to be heard. And I understand that. I've been there. I've had those moments in my 38 years of marriage. So I'm not pretending like it's never happened. But I find that when you can pull back and take a deep breath and slow things down, you're able to practice empathitude, empathy. So this attitude of called empathitude is what I believe is important for you and I. Paul said in Ephesians 4, verse 32, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you. So taking the time to listen and understand, I know this is work. This is mental and emotional work, especially if you're worked up, but to slow it down, taking the time to listen and try to understand your spouse's feelings. What that does is shows them that you care. And it also strengthens the marital bond. So again, these attitudes are things that you and I have to practice. We have to be intentional on. We have to decide if our marriage is worth it and our relationship is worth it. I can tell you they will make a big difference and have made a big difference in so many marriages, including mine. The fifth attitude is love-titude, love-titude. Now, this one again is self-explanatory, the whole idea of love. And love-titude is a foundation of your marriage, right? It's about choosing love every day. Notice I did not say feeling love, because you may not feel loved every day. As a matter of fact, if you felt love every day, there's something going on that I would say there's something wrong, because there are times you don't feel loving, you don't feel loved, you don't feel like giving love, right? But not because you don't feel it doesn't mean love cannot be a part of your interactions, your life, but loving even when it's hard and letting love guide your actions and decisions. Because love is more, actually, I would say love is more than a feeling. I want to say love is an action rather than a feeling. Can you feel love every now and then? Yes, but that should not be the determination or the determinant on whether you're loved or not. Love is an action, it's something that we do intentionally. You know, what Peter says in 1 Peter 4, verse 8, he says, above all, love each other deeply. Love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Love covers over a multitude of sins. That's what love does. And so it's an action verb. It's something that we do. The love chapter in the Bible is called in 1 Corinthians 13, where Paul says, love is kind, love does not keep track of wrongdoings. Love does not hold on to evil. Love is patient, and on it goes, right? Because love is a very powerful um, trait to have. And it's something that we need to remind ourselves of. And that's why we need God love, right? Gratitude is so important because gratitude, having God and the attitude towards God as we ought to, God Himself will give us His love that allows us to love when it's very hard to love, because God's love is what He used to love us when we were unlovable. When we didn't even turn towards Him, He turned towards us. And God promised that He will give us that love, that kind of love to love when it's difficult and it's hard and it's challenging. The love that we have in ourselves is not enough. God has to give us His love. The sixth attitude is what I call patientitude. Patientitude. And patientitude is about having patience with each other. Now, again, if you are relating to any of these, I would love to hear your comments below. Make sure be involved, engage with me, and let me know what you're thinking about these attitude or words that I have made up. Patientitude is about having patience with each other and giving each other grace as you navigate life together. And make sure you hit that like button if you're liking it so far, right? So patientitude is a key to staying calm and connected even when things get tough. And you know what I'm talking about. You've been there, right? You know, I love what Joyce Meyer says. She says, patience is not the ability to wait, but the ability to keep a good attitude while waiting. Wow, that's a very powerful quote, isn't it? Right? So we might need to take a deep breath and to be patient with each other during disagreements, helping to keep the peace, which strengthens our relationship. So patientitude is not something that happens overnight, obviously. It's something that we have to work on daily and make it a practice of ours. Now, the seventh attitude here is one that I think is so very important for every relationship, where I find sometimes couples, a spouse complains because they don't see this happening in their relationship. They see everything else sometimes, not these attitudes per se that I mentioned, but other things happening. But this one here takes the back seat many times. And they'll make statements like, I don't see our marriage being given this attention or this attitude. I don't see my husband giving me this attention, this attitude, or my wife giving me this attitude. But this one here have to do about priority. It's called priorititude. That's one, you go say that 15 times, right? Priorititude is making your marriage a priority, right? It's about setting aside time for each other. Yes, I know there's business, there's children, there's work, there's this, there's that, but we've got to make time for our marriage. We've got to make time for our relationship. You're not going to find time. You have to make time for that. And we have to then be able to attend to each other the way we ought to attend. Because I have heard, as I mentioned before, how many wives have said to me, and sometimes husbands, but mostly wives, that I don't think my husband makes me, not think, I don't feel he makes me a priority and puts me first. I feel like he puts everything, or she puts everything above me. And I take the back seat. I get the crumbs. I get the leftover of the marriage. And maybe you're feeling that today, but I believe that we can change all of that by practicing these attitudes, right? Maybe it's a date night. One of the ways that we have prioritized our marriage is that every week, one day per week, we do a date evening, a date night. We have to make that happen. We put it on the schedule, on the calendar, as any other thing that was important for us. Work is important, it's on the schedule, right? Birthdays and so on. Why should not our date night? So when people ask you about that day, you said, I'm sorry, we have a date. I have an appointment. And it is an appointment. And you want to make sure that everything revolves around that. There are exceptions and there are times when you may not be able. My wife and I have had times when we have had to make an alternative plan because something we had to do. But for the most part, those are the exceptions, not the rule. So we've covered these 7 attitudes of marriage-titude, and that I believe can transform your marriage. And I would love to hear what sayest thou? What sayest thou about this? Gratitude, forgivetitude, gratitude, empathitude, lovetitude, patientitude, and priorititude. So I would love to challenge you. I want to challenge you to pick one of these attitudes to focus on this week and see how it impacts your marriage. I'd love for you to share your experience with me in the comments below. Let us see. Let's have a conversation. I would love to see which of these stood out most to you and your thoughts about these attitudinal words that I've made up. And I'd love for you to share this with someone else, at least one other couple or spouse. Remember, my friend, building a successful marriage takes time, effort, and the right attitudes. And I believe these 7 attitudes will help you. What's your thoughts about that? Here's what I do know, that with God at the center and these 7 attitudes guiding your actions, you can create a relationship that's strong, resilient, and filled with love. So if you like what you've heard and want to go deeper and want to begin by practicing having better conversations with your spouse, then I want to suggest and recommend you get my free resource that I've created just for you called the 28 Daily Conversation Starter Guide that you can have simply by asking. Simply go to happiermarriagesecrets.com/start and request your copy. It's yours free for the asking. And the link will also be below in the description. You will find things to start talking about with your partner that makes it easy to begin a conversation without fighting, because it's very easy and the instructions will guide you as to how to have those conversations. The more you practice, my friend, doing this, the better you will become at handling the tough conversations that will come. You know what I'm talking about, right? So get your free copy today at happiermarriagesecrets.com/start. The links will be in the description of this episode. So do so today. And you should also watch this next video where I share with you the top 5 frustrations in relationships. And you're going to hear these frustrations that maybe you're experiencing right now that you're like, okay, that sounds like me. Well, you got to watch it for yourself. Now, may the Lord bless you and keep you and give you his peace, both now and forever. Amen. See you next video. God bless.